Hey there, I'm Ngaire and welcome to my channel. Today I'm kicking off a new tutorial series using watercolor paint. I've created a collection of super cute greeting cards and I'll be sharing videos over the next few weeks to show you how you can make them, and guess what? I've made it super easy for you to follow along, as you can download my card designs free on my website. Just click on the link below, sign up for free and hit download and you're ready to go. If you don't have watercolor paint, don't worry. You can still download the design outline, colour it in however you like, and it will make a great gift for someone special. To help you navigate the tutorial, I've included timestamps below so you can jump to any part of the video you need. And if I'm going too fast, just hit pause and take your time. Alright then, shall we get started? I'll show you the colours I use, how I mix them, and guide you step by step through the process of creating your own beautiful watercolour greeting card. We're going to be painting this card today. The first thing is to get together all the colours on the palette that we need to do that. Basic colours being used, let's go through them. I like using these paints. This is Ngaire Aqua Drop. I just really enjoy them. So the flowers around the outside are actually all of the amethyst violet. They just have different amounts of water added to them. You only need the tiniest amount. The leaves I use a combination, and I'll take you through it when we're actually doing the painting, but lemon yellow. Again, you don't need a lot. And for the leaves I also use jade green. Just looking at the different colours in here, that dress is also the lemon yellow and jade green. Here I've just used their standard magenta colour, so I'll put a drop of that in, quite a lot. And again in here, that's the amethyst violet again, which we've already got out, magenta, the greens that we're going to mix up. The flower there is lemon yellow, and it's also the Indian yellow, so we'll put a little bit of that in. Amethyst violet here, and the actual violet, I used a little bit of cyan blue just to brighten it up, so we'll go through how I mix that up as well. We'll just drop a little bit of cyan blue in there. Couple of colours that I've mixed, so this one's not mixed actually, but her cheek, I actually quite like ruby red on the little pink marks on the cheek. It's just quite a nice pinky colour, so we'll just put a little drop of that in here. Hardly need any, so that's ruby red, and then we're going to want to mix a skin colour and a hair colour. So the skin colour is vermilion red, and brilliant orange, and the hair colour is a combination of lemon yellow and Indian yellow. So that's all the colours that we're using for this painting. So it's at 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 colours in total, and we can do that entire painting start to finish. So the ones that we want to mix, I use a test strip of the paper that you're going to paint on, just an offcut, or I don't know, just any little bit you've got lying around. We're going to mix up, gosh, I can't even see what that colour is. Let's have a little look. Is that the green? Yeah, that's the green. So we'll have a dark green. Water, sorry, the other thing I use is paper towels. It's just for blotting. So clean your brush, blot it off, and some lemon yellow. Let's just mix up a bit here. I might get a bit of water in there. So I'm just going to get a mid-tone green, and we might want to get a slightly darker bit as well. Just different varying amounts of the yellow, and then plain yellow there. So that's basically your greens, yellow, light, mid, dark. The hair, I like it to have a little bit of both the yellows, so it's not too eggy, and it just kind of, this one brightens it up a bit. So let's just put some here, the tiniest touch of that in there, and then we'll lighten that up a lot. Sorry, I didn't show you what I'd normally do before, so I'd normally mix a colour and then just do a test of it, just to check you like what it's going to come out like. Just move that over a bit. We'll just lighten this up a little bit. So I'm just putting some water in to dilute, and I'll just put a drop of that over there just to get it a bit lighter, and we'll just see how it looks. Which isn't too bad. I might just add a touch more of the lemon yellow So basically I'm just mixing the colour until I get something that I'm happy with that actually has gone a little bit too bright, so I'll just put a little bit of this over here into there. Touch that into there to get there. So yeah, it just got a little bit too bright for my liking, but let's just see what that looks like. I might just add a little touch more of that Indian yellow. Just mush this all across. And I need to find a space where I can add a little bit of water. I might do it in here actually. Just it's so watered down you hardly need any paint at all. Yeah, I think that might be a bit better. Let's have a look. Yeah, I quite like that colour for here. So that's, there we go, that there, which is just diluted down here, is hair colour. And skin colour, this is just for Caucasian skin. Obviously there's loads of different skin colours, but in this example we're going to mix up a Caucasian one, which is actually I use vermilion red and brilliant orange. So just the tiniest bit of both. And a lot of water. That's got a lot too much red in it, so just dab it off. Hopefully I can get it here. Just put it all in. So I mean, this was only 1 drop of paint, and it's it's enough to make a lot of paintings, to be honest. I'll just test it out. I might just use this spot here and we'll water it down quite a bit more. So just cleaning my brush off, adding some water, and we'll just have a look what it looks like. Having a test strip is just, it's just such a, it's a good idea. It will save you a lot of mistakes on your actual painting. So you just mix your colours up until you think you've got them right, and then just paint a little test strip and just see if you're happy with it. So it's actually not too bad. So again, I might do it a little bit lighter. The thing with watercolour paint is it's always easier to get it darker. It's, you know, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's much harder to get it lighter. So you're better off making colour too light and just adding more layers than you are having a colour that's too dark and trying to back out of it. So yeah, that looks fine to me. I'd be pretty happy with that as a skin colour. So we've got a skin colour, we've got a hair colour, we've got some leaf colours, and all the others aren't mixed, they're just straight out of the bottle. So that's the colour palette that I'm using for this painting. When you actually use the paint, again, I'll get some water, drop it to the side, and just transfer over the tiniest drop. You can see there is your magenta. We'll just do it for each one so you can see what colours are sitting in the palette. Again, tiniest touch, and you really don't need much paint at all. There's a cyan blue, and there's a ruby red, and you've got your yellow there. I might just put a bit more yellow in because we'll need a little bit more of that colour. Yellow and green we might use a little bit more of just because of how much is on this particular design. But again, it's not much. These paints last forever. So we're good to go. Here's our A5 card. One little tip, if you haven't done much watercolour painting before, is having 2 water baths is really useful. One to clean your brush and then dry it off. The other one so that you've got clean water to dilute your paint. It's really useful so that if you use dirty water with your colours, you can end up muddying them, so it's always good to have one for mixing your colours and one for cleaning your brush. So I think what we'll do is we'll start with the leaves. So when I paint leaves, I actually like to, what, I got it dirty, there we go. I like to put yellow down underneath. I just find it makes your colours way more vibrant. So whenever I paint, well, watercolour is a transparent paint, so every layer of the paint shows through. and that means that you can use different colours and different layers to change the vibrancy of the colour. And I find if you put a lemon yellow underneath your greens, it just gets much brighter. So I'm going to pop lemon yellow down on every leaf. Right, put that back in so you can see it. Wash my brush off on that one actually, and use the other one for clean. So once you have done, once in the yellow which you're using here, so once you've done that, then we're gonna go for a bit of the green, and I tend to sort of pick a side of the leaf that you want to be the darker green. Or green at all. So what I'm doing is I'm putting some of the green on, cleaning the brush, taking some of the water off, and then just going along the edge of it, which will just soften it while it's still wet. And it helps what it does is that the paint will then spread to the other areas and won't be such a harsh line. So I'll show you again. We're putting some of the paint down, the light green. I'm doing it on one side. You can do quite a few leaves. You don't want the paint to completely dry, just depends how much paint you put down. Clean your brush off, dab it off so there's not as much water on it, but it's still slightly damp, and then just soften the edge. It doesn't matter honestly if you cover the whole of the yellow, because we're going to come in with an even deeper green anyway. So if you want to, you can paint the whole leaf. It's kind of paint on my brush, it's a little bit up to you really. It's actually got a bit runny, so I'm just going to put a bit more of that in, clean brush, a bit more yellow in. It's got a bit too watered down, so I'm just thickening it up a little bit. So again, just put some down. I just pick one side of the leaf, usually the lower side, because it's, you know, where shadows tend to fall. And then wash the brush. Get most of the water off the brush isn't completely dry, and then just go along that edge where it meets the yellow, and it just puts a tiny bit of water onto the page, which then softens that green line, darker green line. Oh, didn't need that. Anyway, so just again, just putting down on one side of the leaf, rinsing the brush, dabbing the water mostly off, and then I dab too much water off then, so just take some of the water off, and then coming in to soften that line. You want to do this while the paint is still wet. That'll probably be enough. Wash the brush off, dab the water, leaving a little bit of water on there, not too much, and then just soften the edge, soften the edge. So we're going to do up here too, so pick a side, basically paint a green line, do a few leaves, however many you think you can do with it, and starting to dry. Wash your brush, dab your brush, and soften that line. So what you're doing is you're actually just trying to have a look. When you put the paint on, you just literally putting it on. It leaves a really hard edge, and what you're trying to do by doing this is actually blend it out. So just rinsing the brush off and taking the water off, and there's still a little bit of water on the brush which dilutes that edge, and and helps it to blend into the other yellow layer. It just takes the harshness off the edge. I just need to move that over again. And there we go. So that is kind of your first layer of green, and I would like to put a deeper green in. I think things look better when they have a larger tonal value, so lighter lights and darker darks. Put a little bit of that in. It might have been a bit much. Let's just have a look. Yeah, so I want a deeper green. I don't want it the darkest it can go, but deeper than what it was, so a little bit more of the jade green. A little bit of water just to thin it down for flow and colour, and let's go. So same thing, so whatever side that you made darker before should stay on the same side, and just add in a darker layer again. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to drop it on, rinse the brush, dab it on, and soften it a little bit. That's it. That's all there is to it. So you have a little bit of paint on your brush, the side that you did darker before, go darker again, put some paint on. Don't try to do too many at once because you don't want the paint to dry. Rinse off your brush, dry it a little bit, and just soften that edge off a bit. Just like that. Cool, I can't even tell what side I did it, but let's do this side. That side, and that side. Rinse your brush, dab most of the water off, and then come. Oopsie, I left too much water on the brush there. I don't know if you saw what happened, so we'll do that one again once it dries. But it just, the paint moved and diluted too much. So that's just, if that happens to you, it just means that there's too much water on the brush. Don't even worry about it, just let that leaf dry. Don't try and do anything with it until it dries, and then we'll just come back and do it again. So what you want to do when you're doing it, so the first yellow we put down over the whole leaf. The light green we put down on one side. This we're doing on one side, the same side as the light green, I guess. And we don't want it to go quite as far as the light green ideally. So each leaf has a transition that goes from the yellow to a light green and into the darker green. So there we go, and then that one that washed out a bit was that one. It's actually completely dry now. Or I would go back, I might put a little bit of the mid one back in. And even when it's wet, you can just come in with a touch of that, and it will, if you keep it right on the side when it's wet, it will just naturally blend in. There you go, leaves are done. So now we're going to do the flowers. Just one thing to be aware of when you're painting watercolour is if you're painting next to an area that's been painted, make sure that area is fully dry before you put a different colour on that touches up near it. I mean, I can show you why. So you've got green down and it hasn't dried, and you come along to do your purple flower and you put it here, and what is going, oh sorry, probably didn't do that very well, but you put it here. What's going to happen is if both paints are wet, they will start blending and moving into each other's areas. So you do that intentionally, and we're going to do that in part of the painting on purpose. But we don't want it to happen. Then you need to be ensuring that all the paint is dry before you put a colour next to it. So you should be able to see what's happening there. They start blending on their own accord, which is great when you want it to happen and not great when you don't want it to happen. So in this instance, we don't want that to happen. So just make sure your leaves are dry. I'm going to use some clean water now. To get our purple. Now there's different purples there. They're actually all the same purple. with just varying amounts of water added. So what I tend to do is mix a really light purple. I'll just turn that around so we can see it in the picture. So I'll mix it up. It's really good to have a sheet of paper just to test your colours. So you want to get to your lightest that you want. So you really dilute the paint a lot. You hardly need a lot of paint. So I'm going to leave the centres of these flowers white, and I'm actually going to paint every flower this light purple, and then I'll just add more layers and depth to some of them. So again, there's no real special technique here. It's just mix up a really pale purple, your lightest one, and paint it on. Leave the centre of the flower white, and that's it. Alright, so it's the first layer of purple done. Doesn't look very exciting yet, but it will. Wash my brush. So what I'm going to do now is I just want to make sure that first layer has dried. And you know, up here it's dry. Down here obviously I've just painted, so it won't be yet. And now I'm going to go slightly darker. Yeah, I always like to test, so I'll just say that again. So I just added a bit more of this violet and just made it slightly darker. You can actually use the same mix and just put another layer on, but I'm quite happy with that, and so I'm just going to pick every occasional one and make it a darker version of the same purple. You can choose which ones that you make darker, it really doesn't matter. Just sort of a random assortment. Because watercolour is transparent, every layer shows through. It's not like acrylic and oil paint where you can go over a colour and I guess like fix a mistake. It just doesn't work that way, and I think sometimes people tend to worry about making mistakes with watercolour, but it's not as bad as you think. I'll just show you on a test piece of paper. If you've got a piece of paper towel, and if you put the paint on and it goes somewhere you didn't want it to go and you think, oh no, you can actually push a dry paper towel on it and lift off a lot of the colour, if not all of it. You might be able to come back with a bit of water. So it didn't quite come entirely off, but it definitely lightens it a huge amount. Cool. So it's already starting to look a bit more interesting. So I'll wash my brush off. What I want to do is add a third depth. So again, same paint, I'm just going to add another drop of the colour into the watered down bit, and let's just have a look at how dark that actually is. Oh, it's pretty nice. Yeah, that's fine. So off we go again, every few. So we might make that one this time. that should be about it. If you want to, if you feel like getting them a little bit too close in their tonal value, you can always go over it again just to make it slightly darker and increase that difference in tone between the other ones. But if you're pretty happy, then you're done. I'm just going to put a bit more on here because again I want that just to be just a little bit darker than it is. Now, all I'm doing here is just I'm getting the darkest one a bit darker so that there's some more contrast between them. Another technique is to do the wings. So what we're going to do on this one is called wet on wet. So everything before was wet paint on dry paper, and this is now wet on wet. So what we're going to do is just get clean water on our brush, and we're going to colour in a wing. Now wherever the water goes, the paint will travel. So you do want to just only get water on where you want paint to go. It might be a bit hard to see because it's kind of like invisible. But you paint water on a wing, and you don't want the water pooling, but you need a certain amount of water for the paint to travel. So once you've done that, then you get the first colour that you want to do. In my instance, that's going to be some of the magenta, and I'm going to do it on the outer edge. So you literally just touch it on, and as you can see, it will travel where the water's going. Now you do need to work quick enough that your water doesn't dry out. So put some on. I'm going to rinse my brush off, and then I'm going to come back with some purple on the inner side here. And then it's going to travel, rinse it off, and then these. And just rinse your brush off when you feel you need to. Dab it dry. Oops, rinse it in there. Now you don't want to go in and add lots more water when the paint is starting to dry, or it will do what's called blooming, which is actually what I've just made it do. So let's just do this, and then we'll just let this layer dry and see how it comes out. I feel like I've gone a bit too dark in the centre, and I'm just going to lift some paint off. Okay, don't worry about how that looks at the moment. We'll just let that dry, and then we'll do a bit more on it. Most issues happen if you come in and you try and fix it before the base layer is dry, and then what you get is the colours just going everywhere. So let's work somewhere completely different to everywhere else, so that we're not going to have any colours running into each other. And I think we'll start with the skin. So let's just see how our skin tone is here. Very slightly dark, slightly upper, but if you're not sure about your colour, just go a little bit light, and you can always put more layers on. Or so the base layer, I'm just going to basically just colour in. So same everywhere, and then my next layer I'll do some shading with. So once you've done that, just let it dry. Leave it alone, let it dry. And I'm just sort of working around the page while I let areas dry. That's not quite, well, it's dry, but it's not fully dry yet. So what I'm going to do is maybe just paint a petal of the daisy in a light yellow. And what you can actually do while that's still wet is you could get a little bit of, this is actually the hair colour. I'm a bit naughty with my paint. And you can just drop it a little bit. Oh, that's not really dark enough. Drop it into the centre and it'll travel out. And it kind of paints itself for you. Watercolour's pretty cool. And again with the violets, just have a look at that colour. Just lighten it up a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint this on. Don't worry about shading, just pop it on for this point. And also you can see here where my my violet's gone close to that yellow and they've actually touched and the colours have bled together, but it doesn't actually matter. So that's dry now. So once it is dry, you can actually wet it again or come in with more detail. So what I might do is just wet it again. So just wait for it to fully dry and then you can wet the whole thing again. If you do it before it's fully dry, it does what's called blooming, and that is it picks up the paint and travels with it and makes what looks like a big watermark. Yeah, so now that's dry, you can do that and come in with a bit more purple in here. Oops, if it's not really as dark as I want. Just get a bit darker. Just want it a little bit darker in some points. Just want that to dribble. Not quite as dark as I want it to be. Touch on the edges. And it will kind of work its magic down. If you want to, you can soften off any areas that are a bit harsh for your liking. Now that's dry, I actually wanted to add a tiny bit of blue. This is cyan blue, and I just think it will lift that purple a little bit, so I'm just going to go over it with a small amount of cyan blue. You've got to pick where you want your shadow now, and I'm going to, sunlight normally comes from the top, so I'm going to shadow the lower side of the leg. Yeah, that's better, but then I am going to soften that off. So again, I rinse my brush, got most of the water off it, and then I'm just softening that line slightly. So you just travel your bristles just down that line with the smallest amount of water. And on the face, I'm going to shade this lower bit here, on the side, and in here. Just like that. Again, rinse off, dab off some of the water, and just come in and soften that off a bit. And the chest needs to be a bit darker too. Depending on how shaded it's already dried, let's put a little bit more of that in there actually. So depending on how much shadowing you want, you can come back once that is dry and do it again. Do another line, rinse it, and just, I like to soften it off, but if you don't have to. You might like a more dramatic line. While that's drying, let's just take a look at this purple. Cool. What I might do is just put a little bit of a darker purple right in the centre bit here. And then I'm going to rinse off my brush, dry it, and just let it travel a bit out. Just need to rinse it off again, and just put a little bit of water. I guess it's just softening the edges, and it just travels a bit, the paint. So again, round that centre bit, clean your brush, dab off most of the water, and then just touch around the edge, and the paint will kind of creep out, which looks really quite pretty. And then, you know, depending on how dark you want that centre, you can always come back and put a little bit more in there. And if it's still wet, it will travel a bit as well and sort of soften itself. It's just, okay, that's good now. So we'll go back and again skin colour, and I'll just put in we're just going to deepen the shadow, so just bring more into the area we shadowed in the first place. So just around that side and under the chin and under the neck. Again, wash the brush off, dry most of the water off, and just soften that edge so it blends out, because your face just doesn't suddenly look one colour and then another. It blends as the light hits it. So there you go. That's dry. So what we're going to do over here is just a super, so like a carnation. Again, I just like to test my colour. I actually want the first bit really light. So what I'm going to do is not do any shading on the first coat. I'm literally going to colour it in with a really diluted magenta. So that's it, and we'll just let that dry. I need to get that water out. So that skin's dry. So what we might do is come back and do the wet on wet on either one of these wings. Maybe we'll do that one up there first. So get some water, that's a bit much. Get some water and spread it around, only touching where you want paint to go. So it's called wet on wet. In different papers I've found the paint travels at travels differently. So just have a play around on your paper, and you can always do some test on a test strip before you do it on your actual piece. And I'll put some pink at one end and some purple at the other, and then just kind of leave it to it. I might just influence this bit a bit. I want it to be quite light in the centre of the wing. I don't want it to get too heavy, so I'm just letting that white kind of show through there. And we'll just leave it like that, let it dry. And I can do this bit down here too while I'm at it. So just leave it like that and let that dry. I actually wanted to add a bit more colour in the centre of this flower. A bit more colour into the centre of this flower. So I'm just going to wet the centre and get a tiny bit of this. Just touch it down and just like that, just let that travel out. And then I was going to paint a base layer on these shoes. So I just tend to move around the painting to work in areas which aren't sitting up against somewhere I've just painted. So you want the paint next to where you're painting to be dry, otherwise you run the risk of it all bleeding in together. So you do need to be a little bit patient with watercolour. It's not quite doing what I want. I'm just going to put a bit of water on and drag it out. And just add a bit more water in here and down there. I don't want to go massively darker, but I would like it to be a little bit on on that edge, just on that very edge. Slightly more magenta. And just slightly more purple down here. Not masses, just a little bit. And then I'll just blend that out a bit. Just rinsing my brush off and yeah, just softening some of the edges if you want to. That actually looks pretty good. So next thing I want to show you was the polka dots on this dress, which you can choose two ways. One is you can apply a masking fluid and make circular dots, which is what I'm going to do, and I'll show you. The other one is to paint the whole dress green and come back with a white gouache and paint the white on. But I'm gonna use this art masking fluid. Yeah, it's gummy stuff. Use an old brush that you don't care about. It's good at ruining brushes. Okay, and what I'm gonna do is just paint on little dots, whatever size. Okay, so now with that you just have to leave it until it dries. That's really important. It doesn't actually take that long to dry, but just leave it until it dries. So, and if you can, just go and clean your brush off straight away with warm soapy water, but like I said, use a really old brush because it does damage your brush. So this should be dry now. Cool. So just wetting it down again once it's like fully dry. Just put it all on wet. So I'll get this all wet. So I might do the purple first. We'll just do a little bit up in here. Just get it a bit deeper, not massively. I just want to, just a little bit and a little bit more in here. And so I just rinse my brush out, dabbed on the paper towel, and I'm just helping to soften and get the edges of it how I want them to look. And that's probably about right, and then just going to check this is still wet down. Oops, that was way too much water. I don't know if you saw that. I'll just dab that on. So I'll just get this end damp again, and I just want to deepen that edge slightly, not loads but just a little bit, and just on the edge. And again, that's just to get the value difference a bit more. Okay, let's rinse that off. So again, I've got to keep working where the paint's dry. We've got to leave these are still wet, so I'm going to come in and do some shading on the shoes, which are going to be on the sole. So again, I'm bringing the darker colour in, just on the lower part of the shoe, washing off the brush, dabbing it mostly dry, and then just softening that edge and softening that edge. Drawing it up. You kind of can touch it down while it's wet. It just depends on the look you like. So I might just drop a bit more of a shadow in on the bottom, and I'll just let that dry, and then I'll do it darker again. I can work on these flowers over here now. So I'm just going to just follow some of the squiggles and add some darker bits to the flowers. And I'll do this again a few times just to build up some different tonal values in the flowers. But anyway, there's the first coat. Are those shoes dry? Dry enough. So I'm going to go for it. There we go. Get magenta in there, rinse off the brush, dab off most of the water, and then come along that edge and just soften it. Come along the edge and soften it. I wanted the centre of those flowers to be like a yellow colour, so I'll just drop that on. Cool, I'm just going to follow some of these lines down with the yellow because they'll go green. So I'm just putting that base layer like I did with the leaves down the bottom, just getting some yellow down. Close enough is good enough. That's dry. So I can come in again with a darker magenta and just pick some bits to go in. Fills up the flower. When I'm actually doing it darker, if it's helpful, so I've got the black lines which are all the little petals, and the tip of a petal is normally lighter and the petal coming underneath it's normally darker, so just behind the black lines I tend to do it a bit darker. And that'll be dry now, yeah, and so I'll come in with some green, just getting the green reactivated. I'll just get some green on here. I mean, once wet it doesn't really matter, we can even come in with a bit of the deeper green again. And so this was the hair that we mixed up earlier, and it's just really diluted in the centre bit. So again, what you want is not too dark. You want it, if anything, too light, and we just, like everything else, we're just going to put a super light base layer on, so just blocking in the colour. So just colouring it in, no shading at this point, just literally getting a base colour down. The main thing with the base colour is that it is really light, lighter, yeah, probably lighter than you think of the hair as being, because we're going to add the shadows and we don't want it to get darker and darker, like we don't want to get too heavy. So you want to start lighter than you think. Might put a little bit more on that shoe. Can't quite decide if I want it dark or not. Let's just bring a tiny bit darker in. Oops. Well, I just went over the line then, you would have seen it. I mean, it really doesn't matter. Watercolor is pretty forgiving. It doesn't have to be perfect. It'll still look pretty good. If you want to, you can try lifting it off, so see if it comes off. Yeah, so it mostly came off. So if it bothers you, if you do that and it bothers you, you can lift it off a bit and then come back, repaint on, wash your brush, and then just blend it out a bit. Okay, once the hair's dry, which it is, then you can come back and you can start putting in some strands. Now the strands that you put in need to follow the direction that the hair would be going in. And just let that dry. They used to have some even deeper purples, deeper magentas, so I'm just going to put a few little bits in with a super fine brush. And again, it just builds up more tonal value, which is just makes pictures look better. And again, I've got like a little bit more in here as well, so I'm just going to put a bit more purple in here. But I want this to kind of bleed a little bit out, so I'm just coming back. I washed my brush and dabbed off the water, and I'm just applying a little bit around it so that it creeps out. Right, so I might go back to that here. I'll just put a few dark bits in. So I'm just going to do a few, that might be a bit too dark actually. A few darker bits in where you get a bit more shadow. come back with this pink and this shoe again, see if I can get it just a bit, I just want it a bit more vibrant. Her face is dry, so we can just get the smallest amount of the ruby red and test this one because you do not want the cheeks to be too bright. Just the tiniest. Yeah, you just don't want to get too bright, they look a bit silly, so just a little bit of the pink. Put a little cheek on. So I'm going to paint the dress much like I painted anything else that was green, although I'm not going to do it quite as bright, so I'm just going to do a base layer of the lemon yellow. So to do this you have to make sure that masking fluid is dry, and you also need to make sure her hair is dry, otherwise you will end up with green hair when you put the green on. So now I just want that to dry, and then we can put the green layers of green in. If you do want to add more interest to these flowers, you can. You can do it by dropping a little bit into the centres and then coming back with a bit of water to encourage it to travel a bit. You can do a little bit of purple around that centre bit, and then just coming around with a damp brush. But it really comes down to what you personally like things to look like. You can just leave them how they were, they don't need this. It's just optional if you like that look. So I just put the darker jade green onto the paint while it was wet. So again, it's wet on wet and it just sort of blends in itself. To get a bit of shadowing on the back of the dress. I might bring a little bit down the bottom too, just down here. And then you just got to wait for things to dry. I might just add a bit more depth into the hair. It just doesn't feel like it's quite there yet. I need to be a bit careful here because I just painted the green. So there's a risk if I get too close to that green, I could end up with green in the hair. Trying to decide whether I want to add a little bit more depth. Maybe just slightly more. Again, put some green on, wash the brush off, get most of the water off, and then just soften the edge so you got more of a graduation of colour. And again, let it dry. Once your paint is fully dry, you can use this, which is a rubber cement pickup, and it will literally just lift. You just kind of rub it on it, and it grabs hold of your masking fluid, and it just peels it off, and you get your little dots for your dress. So masking fluid is great at preserving areas that you want to remain white. And once you've got that all off, and you're finished.